Hello and welcome to Stay for Dinner, a podcast of cooking, curiosity, and conversation. If you love cooking, hate cooking, have no idea how you even feel about cooking because you've never tried it before, congratulations, you are in the right place. The place at the moment is a slightly more echoey environment than the one that we are normally in. Haley and I are on a little bit of a pandemic retreat, hence the different kitchen sound, but that's okay. We are gonna make it work, and frankly, we are enjoying a mild change of scenery, as you can probably imagine. And today, my guest on the show is, I'm so excited about this guest. We already recorded our interview. It was as fantastic as I thought it would be. This is a guy I have followed for a long time. He is a writer for Fast Company named Joe Berkowitz, and he has a new book called American Cheese. It is a nonfiction chronicle of his journey into the world of artisanal American cheesemaking, and I have not gotten to read the book yet, but as soon as I saw that it was coming out, I saw what it was about, I saw who wrote it, I knocked over various digital and social media doors in order to try to get Joe on the show, by which I mean I direct messaged him on Twitter, but with the energy of somebody that was like kicking down doors and then somebody's receptionist runs in after me and is like, you can't go in there. Well, I did, because that was how urgent the thing that I had to say was, and the thing that I had to say was, please come on my home cooking podcast and talk about your cheese book. And I felt compelled to find something after we recorded this interview to make that would satisfy in some small way, the amount of cheese talk on the show today. So I said, in honor of it maybe becoming fall finally, that we just got to do grilled cheese. I don't know, we got to do comfort food, the ultimate cheese. Just really one of the ultimate platforms for cheese. And I'm not even using a recipe, because what is a recipe for grilled cheese? Really, I'm doing my grilled cheese method that I like to do, and so we're gonna do it just because, I'm not saying that you need like a guide to make grilled cheese. I don't think that you do necessarily. I more just wanted to infuse the maximal amount of cheese content into this hour and a half episode that I possibly could. So that's what we're gonna do. Before we get started, quick check of my ingredients. I mean, as they say, you already know what it is. I have some nice sourdough bread, pre-sliced. I have some various cheeses, and that's one of the great things about a grilled cheese, is it really is an opportunity to use pretty much any cheese you have lying around. Obviously, a softer cheese tends to work better. We have some Vermont seriously sharp cheddar, we have about half of a block of that. I don't think I'm going to use the whole thing. On the downside, the pre-crumbled nature means that they will possibly fall out of the sides of the bread a little more than they would otherwise. But on the plus side, because it's already crumbled and because those are super soft cheeses to begin with, they're going to melt really, really well, and I'm excited about that. And then we also have butter that I'm going to use to grease the cast iron for the grilled cheese. And then we also have, I like to use some garlic and some herbs. I basically, where my method, I guess, differs, or I'm sure I'm not the first person to do this, but I almost kind of like to baste the grilled cheese in some of the butter with a little bit of garlic and a little bit of herbs. I find a heartier herb works better, like a thyme or a rosemary. I have some fresh rosemary, and that's it. Butter, garlic, herbs, cheese, bread. What more could you need? I already have the pan heating up here, and going to use a spatula. I would say you could also use, if you have it on hand, another heavy pan or other object that is clean, obviously, to kind of like press your grilled cheese down. I find that to be useful as well. So let's go ahead and assemble our grilled cheese. Again, you don't, this is, I'm not telling you anything you don't know here, but I'm gonna go ahead and slice the cheese that I do need to slice, which is the cheddar. And I'm going to try to slice it as thin as possible, again, so that it has an easier time melting. If I want to do multiple layers of it, I can. And I ended up with about maybe, I would say, 8 to 10 little thin slices of cheddar from this rectangular block of extra sharp cheddar. And again, trying to get them really thin so that they melt nicely, and I'll probably do a couple layers of that on the bread. All right, so assembling the sandwich, I'm going to lay down on one of the slices of bread, a kind of base layer of little cheddar tiles. And then I'm going to kind of fill it in with some goat cheese crumbles. Some of them are kind of crumbling all over the place. It's inevitable. And some of the blue cheese crumbles. And top that with another layer of cheddar tiles. Kind of looks like the Black Flag logo. And something that I genuinely don't know what the orthodoxy is on, that I feel like I've done it both ways before, is like pre-toasting the bread a little bit. I did not do that. So today I'm doing it without pre-toasting the bread. I don't know how I feel about that, actually. I could see an argument for it because that way you just have, you're guaranteeing that you have toasty, crispy bread going into the process, but I feel like it's going to kind of get that way anyway. But I guess my concern there would then be the interior of the bread where the cheese is getting all kind of toasty and nice. So I could really see an argument either way. All right, I cut myself a couple of pats of butter. I'm going to throw those in the skillet. Again, it's nice and warm. They are melting down right away. And then throw the sandwich in. You know what I've never tried that I would like to try at some point? Is what we talked about when Ali Bazari was on the show and doing the grilled cheese with mayo on the outside that gets the bread all nice and super crispy. So I've got a pretty broad spatula here, and now that I have the sandwich in the pan, just using it to press downward, I'm going to do even a little bit more butter in the pan. And then I'm going to throw into the same corner that I just threw the butter into a little bit of, my clove of garlic and the rosemary. Kind of work the garlic around in there. Rosemary just hit the pan. It's immediately fragrant. Kind of smells like Christmas. So now what is happening ideally is that the butter that's in the pan is getting really nice and fragrant with the aromatics. Pressing down again with my spatula. And now I'm going to grab an oven mitt and then tip my cast iron. And then I just kind of, with a spoon, baste the sandwich with the fragrant butter. This is still on the top side. That's not, it's not very crispy because I didn't toast it and it hasn't hit the pan yet. And then I'm gonna flip the sandwich. It's been on one side for a couple minutes now, like 2.5 minutes. And I would say the cheese, looking at it, is starting to get a little crispy and drip off the sides. And we're gonna flip. All right, good toastiness on one side for sure. The side that was just on the pan. Gonna add a little more butter. This is not, this is like the going all out grilled cheese. So we are being liberal with the dairy products. I'm gonna baste the side that was just face down with the aromatic-y butter. And I can see that the cheese in there is getting nice and melted. So this is really just a matter of now getting the other side of the bread nice and toasted, the side that just hit the pan. And I might even turn the heat down a little bit because we're starting to get a little smoke. Oh yeah. I like it when it just becomes like not even really discernible. It's almost like a panini, you know what I mean? I like it really, really pressed. Not getting too much cheese runoff, which is nice. It's not what I necessarily expected when I went into this doing crumbles. And there's a couple of little, natural holes in the sourdough on the one side that I have turned face up now that some cheese is leaking through, and it is very pleasing. Oh yeah. I think we're good. Very well melted, toasty on both sides. Has a nice, really kind of flat, punched down look because of my obsessive pressing. And that's it. I'm not going to baste it again because it's got a nice crispness to it everywhere, so I don't want to add excess moisture, and most of the butter's cooked off anyway. And then I'm going to cut it in half. Ooh, yeah, that's nice. Some cheese is leaking out. Not a perfect cheese pull. It's not exactly an ideal cheese pull combo of cheeses, I feel like. But we got some nice cheese leaking out of the sides, and I'm going to call it good. Would obviously be perfect with some tomato soup. Again, file under things that you don't need me to tell you. And we have, I think, some like squash soup from the store in like a little plastic container that this is going to be great with. And this is all just a prelude to an extremely cheese-laden conversation with Joe Berkowitz. Please go get his book, American Cheese, as you will hear in the interview. A fascinating, funny, interesting person that is super excited about their subject. I really appreciated him taking time in his very busy promo schedule to hang out with me and talk all things cheese. Please enjoy. Joe Berkowitz, thank you so much for joining me. If this were a normal episode of this podcast, I would be placing a plate of delicious food in front of you and we would be in the same physical space. But alas, it is of course not normal times. And so I have no choice but to just hope that whatever you had to eat last was delicious and satisfying.
The last thing I had was caramel flavored rice crackers. And I'd say it's probably a 3 or 4 on the deliciousness scale. And I had enough of them. That's got to be 7 or 8 on satisfying.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, the 7 or 8 was a tip off. The 3 or 4 was on a 10 scale. So that's a bummer for those rice crackers.
Yeah, they could stand to try a little harder next time, but that's all right. It's a hard nut to crack, making rice crackers be more delicious. I think they're mainly there to be a low-fat treat you can stuff in your face without feeling too guilty about it.
Yeah, I think they're just supposed to be like a texture, right? They're just offering you like this is mass and texture, and anything else is a bonus.
Exactly, flavored mass.
Ooh, flavored mass is available to you now in the off-world colonies.
Yeah, comes with free with your slurry.
So how have we were just talking a little bit before we started recording that you've been kind of in the thick of it, like promoting your book. What is it like promoting a book in the pandemic era?
Well, I'd heard from some friends who've published books that it's actually better than you might fear, and hats off to them. But with this book, since it's so about, it's a book about cheese. It's called American Cheese, an indulgent odyssey through the artisan cheese world. I was planning on doing events where people could look, smell, and taste cheese and hear it too, I guess, if it was like sloshing around or something. But now they can only look at cheese at the event. So That is a bit of a handicap, but not. I guess that came off a little negative. It's been fun. It's just kind of. I don't have poltergeist technology to like reach through the screen and give people cheese to taste, and that's kind of a bummer. But it's been fun to do. Otherwise,
I would love to watch that version of Poltergeist, like the cheesemonger version of Poltergeist.
yeah. I mean, they're remaking everything. I know it's been 5 years since they remade Poltergeist, but there's got to be a way to do that with cheese by now.
And the cheese is just like insanely, amazingly good. And it also weirdly like gives you images in your mind when you taste it from lives that you never lived. Like ghosts are transmuting their pain into like ghost cheese.
Yeah, either that or it was like a house built on a burial ground for cows that weren't as delicious milk producers as they were intended to be, and so they haunt the area forever.
Oh man, yeah, and they're that's very weirdly touching to me. The idea that cows would be bitter about not having their milk or their milk made into cheese, like their milk consumed is. Thanks, cows. I'm glad you guys like it on that level.
Yeah, to break out of this riff for a second, I actually found out that when animals aren't milked, they do get hella bitter because, like, for like a goat, when a goat needs to get milked and hasn't been yet, it's like a bowling ball size lump of milk that's just hanging there, and that's painful. I got to visit a lot of farms and creameries over the course of researching the book, so I found out weird things like that.
Interesting. And is that the kind of thing that I guess normally in the wild, like their young would be suckling on them, and then do they just like keep having kids and then they die? Like what's the plan there? Do they have like, I genuinely know so little about this.
I did too. I was shocked by so much that I was shocked by how little thought I'd given it because I'm a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian for like 10 years and I've like practically broken my arm patting myself in the back for, my goodness toward the animals and everything. And then I sort of realized that like through the course of researching the book that the dairy world is interdependent on the beef world because male cows are single use only. They impregnate the female cows, and then they just kind of too many resources to keep them around out of the kindness of a farmer's heart. So they end up selling them for beef usually, and yeah, so that's kind of depressing to think about, but I think it's important to kind of like realize that that's what's happening. And yeah, the goal is to keep the lady cows continuously pregnant and just constantly have their calves. Oh, the calves would be suckling on them, which is how that bowling ball would become no more.
Interesting. So the dairy product is a I mean, I guess it's like when I say it out loud, I'm like, yeah, no shit. But like you said, I've never put any thought into this whatsoever. So it's just it's almost like the way that nature thinks of it, if nature can be said to think, is that the milk is a byproduct of continuing to make cows. And the way the dairy world thinks of it is the continuing to make cows is a byproduct of the milk.
Yeah, it's a real wag the dog situation, but with cows.
So let's go like when I saw that you had this book coming out, I was just like so excited that it was just all one frantic sort of like monkey on a keyboard motion to me, like opening Twitter and DMing you like, Joe, you have to do the podcast. It's so important. But like I really want to dig into this. And speaking of things that I have never put a lot of thought into, what is cheese? Like as best as you can sum it up, what is cheese?
Well, cheese is fermented milk. In the book, I describe it as like cheese is literally heaven. It's what happens when milk sheds this mortal coil and goes off to live its best afterlife. Because it's true. You take milk and essentially you boil it and you put in starter cultures and rennet, and it separates like a lightning bolt from God into curds and whey, which Little Miss Muffet famously ate. And yeah, whey looks like lemon flavored Gatorade, and then curds are just the white fluffiness that eventually becomes cheese curds as we know them. Uh, but yeah, you separate that. Whey's like this protein packed liquid that they always say if you're going to make cheese at home, you save it because you can make it like a really good broth out of it. But I had to make cheese a bunch of times at home as research, and I never once used whey in broth, which I guess just probably says more about my adventurousness in soup making than it does anything else. So yeah, that's basic. That's the basics of cheese. The only ingredient I left out is salt. After the curds are separated, you got to salt that thing up, and then you basically have cheese.
And then where, like, how does the sort of like elemental, just like milk comes out of a cow or a goat, and then it becomes like then you, like you said, boil it and then hit it with these like the cultures and the rennet, which I can't wait to ask you what that is in a second. How
Well,
does it then splinter into all these? So that's the sort of like in Plato's allegory of the cave, that's the sort of like the pure, there's just sort of the curds and whey. How does that then split off into all the various shadows of the, like all the different cheeses that we know and love? Like, how does that happen?
this is what inspired me to write the book. Is I just had this moment of realization where I always knew I loved cheese so much. I've always been what's technically referred to as a big cheese boy or a real cheeso. Uh,
BCB.
yeah, a BCB. And but I never thought about it. I never thought about the extent of the galaxy of cheese. I just thought if you would have asked me how many cheeses there were, I would have said maybe 100. There are thousands, and I went to a Valentine's Day tasting 2 years ago at a famous cheese shop called Murray's in Manhattan. And when they were talking about it, I just sort of started to get a sense that of everything that has to go right and everything that has to happen in order for the cheese to taste as delicious as it did that night. It has to be a certain kind of animal, and it has to eat a certain kind of feed, and it has to be milked at a certain kind of day. The microclimate of where the food you feed the cow, that can change how it tastes, and then it has to go into a proper make facility, and it has to be aged by someone whose job it is to age cheese, and they devote years and years of their life to learning this craft of aging cheese. These people are called affineurs. And then after that, it has to be distributed, and people have to care for it in the right way. And then finally, it gets to you. And yeah, I thought that was amazing. And the splintery path towards how it ends up being a specific kind of cheese is just all those people involved in each step of the process know their stuff, and they know what they're working toward. Some of it are these ancient techniques that have been passed around for like centuries, and some of it is just figuring shit out over a vat when you know what you're doing already and you're just sort of freestyling. So yeah, it's four basic ingredients, but it goes in any number of directions based on who's making it and what their intent is and what they're working with and where.
I'm going to say something that probably sounds actually, or is like thunderingly obvious, but it feels weirdly, I guess, appropriate, that like a cliche sort of like thing that you would serve at like a cocktail hour for like before the symphony or something, or just like an adult night out or night in, is just like wine and cheese. Because a lot of the things that you're saying about cheese also feel true of wine, where it's just sort of like, it is very simple. Like there's just the grapes, but then that becomes, through a process of fermentation, becomes like so many different things, but also like where the grapes are grown and what you like, the earth and the climate around them and all of those things being hugely important to what you ultimately get. And that it's like a fermentation process that like could just result in something completely gross that would make you want to throw up. But the fact that it's been perfectly figured out and lovingly sort of, I don't know, like it's neat that those two things go together as often as they do, or it feels like not coincidental that they do, weirdly, when you think about it.
No, it's totally. I mean, the cheese world and the wine world kind of mirror each other. And then, sometimes people are totally fluent in both. I know people who were like mongers who crossed over and became sommeliers. And actually, I was about to say, and vice versa. But now that I think about it, I do not know any sommeliers who became cheese people. But I will say that, like,
way to throw down the gauntlet for somebody.
Yeah, it is interesting. They both have like opinions about the other that aren't always positive, and so I like to think of like cheese people and wine people as like the bikers and versus joggers in Central Park or wherever, where
Sure.
like when you're jogging and a biker is like on your left, and you're like, fuck you, like don't be so aggressive. But then when you're biking and you see someone jogging in the wrong spot, you like want to scream at them. So I guess this is a complicated metaphor. I'm not sure it entirely tracks, but yeah, it's those two groups do occupy the same space, and they have a weird relationship with each other.
You said that they have opinions about each other that aren't always positive. Like, what is the like wine world stereotype of a cheese person and vice versa?
Well, I know that cheese people work really hard at making it more approachable because there's still like a residual whiff of like cheese, like fancy cheese being this like hoity-toity thing that you have at French restaurants, and that's it. And they're trying to change that image. They want it to be really accessible and fun. And wine, it tends to kind of like lean into that sophistication. As far as I know, I don't I've gone to like all kinds of crazy cheese events by now, and I mean, wine fits into so many contexts, but I can't think of any like any sommelier driven events that are just like fun and youthful oriented and silly. There's like not a silliness with wine, at least widespread. I could be talking out of my ass here. I read a book too, like I read this book called Cork Dork as I prepared to write the cheese book, because it was a similar-ish scenario in that a journalist, she just suddenly realized like, hey, wine, it's awesome. What if I was a sommelier? And like the book is her journey into becoming a sommelier. And there were like these. She describes these crazy bacchanal type situations that she got into from time to time. But those, I mean, I don't know. I didn't sound like quite the same thing that I've experienced in the cheese world. And I think for the most part, it does have a bit of that, like, people sitting around and taking sips of wine and spitting it out so that their palate remains untainted, and, like using the word notes of oak and, all that stuff. Whereas cheese often is a bit more loosey-goosey from what I've gathered.
So it seems like that's really interesting. I guess I can't say that I'm surprised, but it almost seems like what you're describing is like wine has an assumed fanciness to it, or a mystique that it seems like a lot of people in the wine world are maybe trying to maintain
Whereas the cheese people are a little bit going like, no, you should take this as seriously as you take wine, but we're trying to get there by making it really accessible to people who are going like, cheese, right? Don't you just like cheese. Everybody likes cheese. Not literally everybody, but a lot of people like cheese. And we're trying to use the curb appeal of just the idea of cheese to bring you into this larger world of how really cool and kind of sophisticated it could be. Is that accurate?
That's the thing. Yeah, you can get super nerdy about cheese. I mean, I have. But at the same time, the draw is like also here's a fun and silly thing. Cheese is goofy, and I mean it's also something that people take super seriously. At the very first tasting I went to, like the one that like really kind of gave me my cheese epiphany moment. There was some guy who was like, this is reminiscent of prime rib with pickled onion. I don't know. He had like some really complicated line, and at the time I was like, "Who's this jackass who is so serious about this?" But then by the end of my cheese adventures, I mean, like I ended up, it's mostly a focus on America, like what's going on in American cheese, because a lot of people don't even realize that there are like amazing cheeses coming out of America now. The book, like researching it, took me around the world. I went to France and Switzerland and Italy, and by the end of it, my wife, who was there snickering with me at the beginning at like this guy who was like, it tastes like prime, we ate a cheese and she was like, this tastes like, I'm getting like caramelized banana. And I was like, imagine you say that like a year and a half ago. And yeah, I mean, it's just, you can get super nerdy into this stuff, but it does have that accessibility, because if you don't tell anyone like the really descriptive or nerdy stuff about cheese and just are like, here, taste this, you're probably going to taste it and be like, that's delicious. Thank you. And then that's, I think whereas wine can be a bit more daunting and hard to penetrate. Somebody has to like really guide you through what you're supposed to be tasting and why that's interesting.
That makes sense. I mean, I don't think of myself as being somebody who I like wine, but I've never found myself or I've never been somebody who's able to credibly taste it and go, I'm getting notes of a, like waterlogged Beverly Cleary novel or something. Like I've never been able to pull stuff out like that. But one of the most kind of transcendent experiences I ever had with when I was first getting into kind of like cooking and a little bit into like fine dining and like all that different stuff. My wife and I had just come off of a big like Top Chef watching Jag, and she took me to Craft for like my birthday or an anniversary or something. And we had a really great waiter who was just like, at the beginning was like, are you guys, this is a special occasion? We were like, yeah. And he was like, okay, well there's this tasting menu. And that's like, yeah, it's like, sometimes that's if it's people's first time, we're sort of supposed to be like, yeah, maybe you should get that or whatever, but you could do that, or you could just kind of do like, if it's okay with you guys, I'll just order you some stuff. And like, and he was just like, this is how I like to eat. And we were like, yes, please do it. And anyway, at the end of the meal, he ended up bringing us this like cheese plate and like a couple of different like digestifs. And I remember eating a bite of some cheese and having a sip of the after dinner liqueur. And for whatever reason, the combination of that cheese and that booze, I just remember being so strongly being like, this tastes like the water on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride smells. And it was just such a strong sense memory. And it was just so the idea that cheese and alcohol in combination could taste like that, it could give you that sort of moment, was just so revelatory to me. It's so cool. And I've never had that moment just like taking a sip of wine before.
Yeah. I mean, the world of pairings is full of creative possibilities. You know, you can try so many things with in combination. You know, I've had like I love buying a bunch of different kinds of cheese and then just looking through the pantry or the fridge and just be like, what can I try to get to go together here? And, you know, I've been to a fancy restaurant. I went to like this Michelin star restaurant in New York called Restaurant Danielle. And because I had to try, I kept hearing about these cheese carts. Like it's like a fancy French way of dining that had a moment in America like 20 years ago, but it sort of died out. And that's one of the last remaining ones in New York at this restaurant. And so having someone put it together for you to like give you the preserves or the figs or whatever that it's going to go best with a cheese that they also pick out for you, having like a really curated experience like that you were just describing too, it is amazing. And it makes eating into more of an experience, which I like. But at the same time, I also love the creative freedom and the curiosity bait of, you know, seeing, are these golden grams going to work with this Gouda, and just stuff like that too,
and did they?
They did. Yeah. The best, there's a woman I interviewed for the book. Her name's Tia Keenan. She wrote The Art of the Cheese Plate. And she said, you know, like the best pairing, or the way you know it's a good pairing is if you like it, or something like that. I forget exactly what it is, but you know, the gist is that taste is subjective. Expert opinions can be guidelines, but mainly it's just you try shit out and you see if you like it, and that's the most important thing.
That's really cool. I have also a sort of like, I guess, a current, as maybe we all do, or a lot of us do, like cheese is very close to my heart and very sentimental to me right now, because my wife Haley and I feel like the first week of the sort of like pandemic, like lockdown, when it was the beginning of March and everything, or mid-March, and everything was completely insane. And it was just like, oh, I think we started this week and it was normal. And then we're ending the week being like, I think we'll never go anywhere again, at least for a couple weeks. Right. And then now here we are, you know, however long after that. But I remember we did have we always liked, you know, going out for a happy hour or a little bit, whatever, at the end of the week. And we just decided like, okay, we're going to have a happy hour at home, and we're going to put some cheese out on our cheese board. And it was almost a weird sort of like, not in any way actually comparing these two situations, but a sort of like London during the Blitz kind of stiff upper lip moment where we were just like, there must be civilization, must be preserved. Like there was a real feeling of like, this cheese board means that there's something to hang on to. And then we have continued to do that pretty much every like Friday and Saturday night for the, you know, since basically. And it's been such a good like ritual at the end of the week, you know, on like a Friday or Saturday night, just something that when there's so few other markers of the passage of time to just have, and cooking very much functions in the same way for us in general. And definitely right now, where it's just sort of like, this is a thing that still means that Friday night is Friday night and it's different than Thursday night for us. Like that's how it's been working. And it, so I think I guess there's not really a question here other than to say like, isn't cheese cool? And her cheese board's cool?
No, I mean, I had the same thing where I was really excited that I still could get cheese at the top of the pandemic, like March, April. In March, I was in New York, and like as everything was starting to like really get crazy, and I just on a whim, I was like, is there a chance they're still selling cheese at Brooklyn Larder? Because so many places had started to close down, and they were, and you know, it was like the whole the trains are still running kind of feeling to it. And as time wore on, it felt good to throw myself into some of the stuff I was just describing of like carefully setting out, like cutting the cheese. By the way, that expression loses all trace of like the juvenile, of like, like the fart thing. After you hear 1,000 people just casually say it, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. Like once you hear it enough, you just barely even remember that this used to be a funny thing. Um, but, but yeah, I would, carefully plate the cheese and figure out things to go with it. And it would just be an activity to throw myself into where for a little while, it didn't feel like the walls were closing in and I wasn't thinking about other stuff because I had this delicious thing in front of me. So yeah, I hear that. And then also, yeah, cooking is just an awesome thing to do during the pandemic. We never got into the sourdough stuff, but I wrote an article for Fast Company where I work about trying out masterclass and other distance learning things like that for a few weeks. And so I was taking all kinds of cooking classes that way. And damn it, if Gordon Ramsay didn't teach me how to poach an egg. And yeah, doing stuff like that definitely made the pandemic more palatable.
So you did find that I've always been curious about those, but I've never taken the plunge. You found Gordon's to be yeah. What was your experience with that?
Well, yeah, it was effective. I mean, it's more. I haven't. I know that you can just go on YouTube and probably like look up visual recipes, having people cook something and explain stuff to you. So I don't know how this compares to that. All I know is that my impression of Gordon Ramsay beforehand was like guy who screams at Brighton Cook on TV all the time. And then when he just is just directing you on how to do this, he is just super confident and projects the utter competence. It's like, Tom Hanks in a movie. You're like that's a character. Everybody else is in good hands in his company. He's going to take care of business. It's going to be great. And that was the vibe that Gordon Ramsay projected. Like okay, well obviously he knows what he's doing, and now look at this. I poached an egg. Holy shit. So yeah, I found it worked, and yeah, it made me, I guess, want to check out other ones because now I can cook a poached egg and not much else. So, anyway, masterclass, check it out.
This has been, I don't have pre-roll ads. I just try to work them seamlessly into the show. And I think we did a great job. I genuinely am like, I want to try that now. That sounds fantastic. But that does lead me to my next question, which is just in general, where does cooking fit in or not fit into your life at the moment?
Well, at the moment, I'm in kind of a weird space. I have classically been a yo-yo dieter, sort of. Like I mean, I guess it's a lot to get into, but yeah, I like grew up like pretty darn overweight, and then I went to college, and instead of like the freshman 15, I like blew up even like much further than that. And I was like over 300 pounds. I would step on a scale and it would go click and it would go all the way. And so I couldn't tell how much over 300 because that's just as far as it would go. And then when I was 21, I lost the weight and I've been hovering in like a 25 to 30 pound zone between 180 and 210 pretty much ever since. Anyway, that's a long preamble to say that from I gained some Trump weight after the election and all through 2017. And at the end of that year, I was like, I got to do something about this. And so I got a kind of a bespoke diet by this fitness guy, and it was like bespoke. It was part of a workout regimen too, and it required eating basically the same couple kinds of meals throughout the week usually, and then, a cheat meal on the weekends. So I did that for like a year and a half, and I was just cooking all the time, like rice and veggies and tofu in various combinations. And then, even though I had definitely fallen off the diet with the cheese book, because like once you give yourself a hall pass for anything involving cheese, like all bets are off. So I was just sort of, oh yeah, I was just sort of like going through the motions of, I guess I'm cooking my, my quinoa and my tofu, but like then I would go to the cheesemonger invitational, and there would just be like like a giant trough of every kind of cheese you've ever thought of. And yeah, so Godspeed at that point. So yeah, and then since the pandemic, I've just been since like March or so. I was like, all right, well, it's the end of the world. I'm not going to even pretend I'm still on that diet. And it's not that I've like gone to seed or anything like that, but now I just cooking pretty much basics and cooking pasta, cooking. I'm poaching eggs, and um, and yeah, I keep it pretty simple. My wife and I, we will every now and then mostly talk about making something crazy. And I fancy myself. I like have this self conception of like I want to be the kind of person where when there's a recipe that's kind of going around that everyone's making, like whatever the hell Allison Roman's cookies were that people were losing their minds over, just something like that that reaches me, and I'm like, you know what, this Friday or Saturday I'm gonna make that and we're gonna eat it. But that so rarely, if ever, actually happens. But that's how I want to be. I want to be like when there's something fun that people seem to be doing, I want to get in on that too. And so maybe I'll make it a goal to do that in the near future.
I think that sounds like a nice goal, but I know exactly what you mean. Before I had this show, and then also now that I do have the show, like I find myself, that recipe will come across my like social media, or I'll see it on, food websites or whatever. And I'll be like, oh man, that looks great. And I'll put it in my email. I can basically just like, it gets filed away automatically if I send it to myself in an email in like a recipes folder, and then I make the same 4 things. Like that's kind of I feel like I was a little bit that way anyway. And then now during the pandemic, I would be lying if I said that I've done a ton of really adventurous cooking the way I thought that I might have under the circumstances. I think it's just, I don't know. I just haven't gone to that place. That part of myself hasn't really been as active during this time as it is under normal circumstances, I guess. Basically, like it just doesn't, the flow of sort of like, okay, I have this really ambitious thing that I want to make, and so I'm going to go to 4 different stores and I'm going to try to track down all the ingredients, and I really want to get exactly the thing the person said to get. Like that's a big part of it that I enjoy. And in a world where it, especially initially, kind of seemed like, is it even safe to go to the grocery store? What's even open? Do you have to wait in line? It just didn't, that part of it just didn't seem that appealing to me. And so I think that closed a lot of the avenues of, I am going to be that person that tries the new big hot recipe that everybody's trying like that. I completely understand what you're saying. I have not really been in that place either, in what variety has really cropped up, I think is almost entirely a function of the fact that I have a podcast where I have to make, a new thing every week or a couple of weeks or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my wife tends to be the better cook than me, and she will every now and then, not like a viral recipe, but she'll just see something a friend made and get competitive and be like, I can make that. And so that tends to be more often when we'll end up cooking something fun or interesting or just different. And for the last, we moved, we left, we left New York in March, went to Vermont. Then we went from Vermont to Minnesota, and then we went from Minnesota to Denver. And we were in Denver for 3 months. During that time, it was my first time ever being in being in a situation where I could go to the weed store and just get weed. For me, it was just a wild thing. I'd been in Denver before, I'd been in California before, been in Seattle. So I'd been in the situation, but I hadn't lived there. And so anyway, I was high all the time, more or less, after work. So I was, my role in cooking was the cutter. That was the one thing I could do.
It was the hyper-focused, yes, exactly. Yeah. I know exactly the type of, I'm not a huge pot smoker, but I know exactly the type of activity that you're talking about where you're like, this I can do.
Yeah, it was the one thing. And you'd think that it's kind of counterintuitive because you're like, don't put a stone person around knives. But I would I have it in my head, like, okay, the last thing I want to happen right now is to cut my fingies. So I'm going to do this super carefully. And then it becomes like a little game, like just don't hurt yourself and we're going to eat really good food. And so, so that was our arrangement pretty much, was that I would be the cutter and she would be the cooker, and we ate well for those two.
That is, yeah, no, for sure. I know what you mean. The few times I've ever tried to cook stoned, it's not that I actually was as bad at it as I would have thought. It's that I can do this, just don't also try to engage in a conversation with me, which is kind of just how I am a little bit anyway, especially if I'm making something that requires a lot of focus. I feel like, obviously dinner parties are not really functioning right now, but back when they were, if my wife and I were in the kitchen and then you have like a friend comes in and one of you should be able to free yourselves and go out into the living room and entertain your guests. But hey, guess what? It's not really happening. And we both need to be like trying to finish making the dinner. And then you have a friend who's just kind of like standing by the fridge being like, and how have you guys been? And you just want to be like, I so badly want to engage with you right now, but I also very much don't want to cut my finger off. And that's when I'm not stoned. So I can only imagine.
Yeah. I was definitely not the world's greatest conversationalist. I was barely able to follow what was going on RuPaul's Drag Race while cutting. But most of the time I did, and my fingers remain intact. So it worked out pretty well.
Oh man, if I'd known you were a Drag Race fan, I feel like we could have set up a segment where we just have you pair like queens with cheese, like who is what cheese.
Oh my God. Oh no. Oh man. That's a spicy
Again,
meatball.
not really directly the purview of the podcast, but the podcast ends up being about reality TV about 30% of the time anyway, just because it's another thing that I really, really like. So, we'll have you back. We'll set that up. That'll be a Patreon exclusive.
I would say that Valentina is Cabrales, which is, and what other one? I can't think of, dang.
Who's Harbison?
Who's Harbison? Ooh, that's a good one. I would say Reverend Dr. Silky Nutmeg Ganache, maybe?
This is probably the most alienating thing in the world if you haven't eaten these specific cheeses. And I haven't eaten. What's Cabrales? Tell me about that.
That is a spicy, a kind of minerally blue cheese from Madrid, and wow, I'm not even sure why I was so certain about that. I think it was just because I just remembered like a big Valentina moment in the reunion episode that season that was quite shocking, and it just gave me a little flashback to when I had Cabrales, and I was like, "Whoa, you need to take a sip of water after you eat it, like right away."
Is that when Rue? I feel like Rue kind of just dressed her down for being I feel like Rue has a real like boomer to millennial thing where he feels like he needs to kind of like let you know that you have to like, earn your stripes and not phone stuff in. And I don't know, very like, I feel like Rue is always very much like, if you think you are going to have a safe space here, you won't, or whatever. I just remember there being some sort of like dressing down of Valentina that happened during the reunion.
Yeah, I think she was just a little too high on her own supply, and yeah, RuPaul came in and like tried to put it try to get her to slow her roll a little bit or something like that. It all kind of blends together. I was more or less Drag Race agnostic until I had like watched an episode with some friends last year, and I was like, okay, I could see how this is fun. And then during the pandemic, not to keep bringing it back to to the end of the world, but yeah, like at the start of it, this couple that we're friends with, we just started watching on Friday nights over Zoom. We would just watch it together, and it became our Friday. Oh yeah, for us, it was like the same thing with you and Haley about with like your Friday cheese plates or cheese and wine. It was this ritual that I always knew at the end of the week, like, oh well, I can barely tell one day from the next, but I know tonight we're going to be watching Drag Race with Sean and Raphael, and it was always something to look forward to. And then after that season was over, season 12. And we went like right into they had the celebrity one next, and then also we started watching past seasons because my wife has already watched them all, but she was over the moon that I was like ready to go back and do the catalog with her again. We went backwards. We went like 12, 11, 10, 9.
Oh, interesting. So you did like the Benjamin Button rewatch.
Yeah, and. But then we skipped around a little bit, and as is, the only ones I haven't seen are 6, 7, and 8. So got that coming to me eventually. So I'm looking forward.
What a treat. Yeah, I didn't know quite how to frame it, but I wanted to start a larger discussion on Twitter just about like, what are those things for people who don't know that are just like veins of pop culture that if you like open them up and you're like, wait a minute, I like this, that there's like 100+ hours of entertainment in front of you. And that's definitely one. If anybody listening, I feel like if you're listening, you've probably, I don't know why, but you feel like within the Venn diagram of somebody that has probably already watched and loved Drag Race. But if you haven't, oh man, you got to do it. I can't remember if it's still in any of the streaming services. That's not my job to figure that out for you. But if it is, oh boy, lucky you. I'm so jealous.
Yeah, I think we may have alienated some people. Someone's hitting the 15-second button a bunch of times right now, but like somebody else who does know both Harbison and Silky Nutmeg Ganache is so excited that we've delved in this deep.
No, I completely get it. And I have to say that Harbison is a cheese that I discovered because of reality television, because it was mentioned on Karen Akunowitz, the Fox and the Knife restaurant in Boston, Massachusetts, mentioned it on her season of Top Chef because they had to do a like cheese pairing challenge. And I guess she got assigned Harbison or picked Harbison or whatever and was all excited because she was like, that is my cheese. That is like the gateway to my heart. If my wife like gets in trouble or I like had a bad day, she'll like bring me a wheel of Harbison. And so Haley and I were like, we got to try that fucking Harbison. And it wasn't until like a year or two later that we knew of a store that carried it. And then it completely lived up to the hype.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Harbison's great. And I tend to prefer it to Winnemere if you've had that one too. It's like a similar cheese from Jasper Hill also. But yeah, I spent a lot of time eating Jasper Hill cheese, and I visited the cellars in Vermont, and that place is amazing. I had to sign an NDA before I went in, so I don't have pictures of it or anything, but I can describe. They have robots who turn cheeses and clean cheeses all day. So you walk into this room and it's just like I can't say whether it's hundreds or thousands. It may be 1,000 at least. I haven't written down the number, but yeah, there's at like 50-foot high ceilings, all wheels of Cabot cloth bound cheddar stacked, and then there's a robot, and because it's Vermont, it's called Turney Sanders because it's they wanted to name it Tina Turner, but like somebody else who has the robot and is in the cheese community already named it that. So, but yeah, I walked in this room and saw this robot turning cheeses, and it was so cool. But
please go ahead.
I was just going to say, you mentioned having heard about that on a show on Top Chef. I screened the new season of Big Mouth that's coming out. I get like advanced screeners and stuff for my job, and there was an offhand reference to Humboldt Fog, which, do you know that cheese?
I've had it before. Is it like a type of cheese, or is it like a brand of cheese? I know I've had it, but I'm struggling to remember when and what it's like.
It's like a bloomy rind cheese that has a layer of ash in it, and that sounds disgusting, but it's just like a little black layer that you don't taste. It doesn't taste like ash, but it's kind of famous. It's from the producer is Cypress Grove, and the cheese Humboldt Fog. It's just like kind of one of those things that like swept. It was like a craze for a while, just really popular, and it's just you can get it in any Whole Foods across the country. It's like one of those canon cheeses, I guess. But yeah, they mentioned it on Big Mouth, and like it would have been a reference. I had no idea what the hell they were talking about because it's not. There's no indication that it's about cheese. It's not a cheese context. It's just they mention it offhand. And so it is interesting now to be able to pick up on stuff like that. For my book launch earlier this week, I have been kind of like saving moments from pop culture where cheese is referenced in any kind of funny way. And so I put like a little video together to play during the launch. And I liked every little thing I could find. I don't know if you remember from Something About Mary, but when Harlan Williams is the hitchhiker. Do you remember that scene?
Oh, absolutely. I love that scene. I've watched it a la carte on YouTube before.
Yeah, it's so funny. It holds up so well. But there's like one part where he's like, we're doing like the whole 7-minute abs thing. And like towards the end of it, when Ben Stiller's just looking at him like, what the fuck are you talking about? He's like, it's like you're talking Gorgonzola when it's clearly brie time, baby. And so I just have like a clip I have like this 3.5-minute video that's like wall to wall, little moments like that I was just, as I watched stuff over the last few months, we revisited Something About Mary, and I took a note. I'm like, oh, I'm putting that in.
That is one of my sort of like, that scene I feel like in particular is one of those things that you would like back when DVDs were, like that was the only way that you could have or watch movies. That would be the kind of scene that you would like pull. And it's like, even if your friend hadn't seen the movie, that you would like skip to on the DVD just to show them that. And it does entirely work. It's like its own little sketch within the entire movie. And I think about it all the time just because of Harlan Williams's line where, because for those of you who don't know, he's pitching, there's a popular thing in the late 90s when the movie's being made called 8-Minute Abs, a workout video. And he's like, I've got this genius idea. It's 7-minute abs. And if it doesn't work, we give you the extra minute free. And I just always remember, because he's so chipper and happy. And then Ben Stiller is basically just like, why is that? Like, why not? What if somebody comes out with like a 6-minute abs? And Harlan Williamson just gets so like, he basically breaks and goes insane. And it's just like, no, 7, man, that's the number. And I feel like that kind of thinking comes up so much in life. And especially even now in 2020 of somebody just sort of arbitrarily going like, you're off base, 7, man, that's the number, is just like holding tight to something beyond all reason. And usually I'm the person doing that, and I just think of it in my own head, and I love it.
Yeah, the Trump era is rife with Something About Mary hitchhiker logic, for sure.
Absolutely. So who is your favorite person or just who leaps to mind from you that like typifies your experience of somebody that you met in your journey into the cheese world? Like, who is your hero or just favorite character or person that you wouldn't have met otherwise?
Let's see. Well, the first guy I met who I was like, I've got to hang out with this motherfucker as often as possible is this guy named Adam Moskowitz. He's a importer and distributor of cheese, and he has a warehouse where inside of it he has this room that just looks like an ark, kind of. It's completely covered in wood, and he calls it the barnyard. He has turntables and like wall-mounted speakers and all kinds of all these tables laid out. He has these parties called Barnyard Collective where people will come over, like just cheese people in New York. I did not know they had a place to gather, but they came here and Adam would open up his warehouse and take like a pallet of beer, Grolsch or something, and just be like, everybody have at it. And just people would just be grabbing beers. And then he would put on, you'd have a speaker talk about cheese, like either someone who makes it, someone who sells it, someone who does something interesting with cheese. So there'd be like some kind of like almost a salon, in the word. And then the second it seemed like people had enough of this conversational thread, he would say like, all right, who's ready to do some fondue? And then it would just become a party. Then he would just start DJing. Someone would start cooking fondue. I don't mind saying that, like some joints would come out sometimes and everybody would be drinking beer. And it was just pretty wild. And this guy invented something that's like a by now 11-year, I think, institution called, I think I mentioned it earlier, the Cheesemonger Invitational, which is when these mongers face off to do like the NFL version of their typical day of work. Basically, it's just like someone on stage trying to cut perfect quarter-pound wheels or quarter-pound chunks from a wheel of cheese while a crowd cheers. Like there'll be a ref basically weighing each piece that's like a guesstimation, and if it's exactly a quarter pound, they get a point. And so you'll see it be like 0.26, and everyone will be like, no, and then it'll 0.25. I'll go, yeah, and just to like see people cheering for what's basically the same thing as a monger's day of work is nuts. But then they also, got really creative, and they would have to like prepare these special, a perfect bite, a perfect plate, and yeah, and all kinds of weird, a perfect pairing of like a cheese and a different kind of alcohol. So the guy who invented that, Adam, was fun to be around, knew everybody. And I ended up doing some international traveling. Like he let me tag along when he went to a international cheesemongering competition in Tours, France, and I got all kinds of access. Access in the cheese. It's not like real velvet rope shit or anything, but like
No, I mean, you say that, but I legitimately am just like, okay, now I have to survive the pandemic just so I can eventually try to harangue you into getting me invited to that dude's cheese parties someday if we're ever in New York. You know what I mean? Like the access to me is very, very real. I need this access. That sounds incredible.
The good news is everybody in the cheese world who's read the book so far is ecstatic about it. And I really did want to do right by these people because they let me in their world. They were really cool about it and open. And everybody, it's like a really passionate, dedicated community. And everybody who's in it, they're not in it to make money. They're in it because for whatever reason, they fucking love cheese and they love what they do and they love their community. in the same way as like the comedy community, it's a real found family kind of thing. You find your tribe. Cheese world is like that too. And I've met people who've left every different kind of job to go join this world because it is a lot more analog. You are working with your hands and your senses, and everybody who's in it loves it. Nobody's like everybody I hang out with is on Twitter all day and talks about how they hate it. And
sure.
And that's me too. I do that too. And these people, they just, I'm sure not, I don't think they wake up, I don't have any illusions that they wake up every morning being like, another day of my life that I love, and I'm sure it's going to be a perfect day. I don't think that's the case, but I don't know. They just genuinely love what they do and are enamored of it, and they seem to know that no matter how many thousands of cheeses they've tried, there's always going to be another one that knocks their socks off, and that's it's fun. And yeah, so I think I got a little derailed there, but yeah.
No, I think there is something inspiring about, like, I'm sure like there's been times in this process where you have gotten sick of talking about cheese, or you have been a little bit sick of cheese, and that I'm sure these people feel the same way, where it's like, this is their life. And so occasionally, every so often, they're going to be like, you know what, I want to do or think about or eat anything but cheese. But it is neat that it's the type of thing where it's just like, it's something that at the end of the day, it does just bring people joy. There's just something about it that is just really great. It's a great, neat, cool food. And it's like, even though it can be such a like staple food, it's got protein in it, it's all these things. It actually is like nutritious and all this other stuff, unless I'm completely wrong about that, in which case by all means correct me. But like, it is also just like, it's one of those things that it's like cookies, or, nobody's ever like, oh man, cheese. Or I mean, some people are, I'm sure, but like, do you know what I mean? Like there's just something about it that is automatically like, oh, sweet cheese. Great. In any form.
Yeah. It's like the way I've been comparing it lately. It has the same thing that bacon has, where it's like this meme food. But instead of like, Ron Swanson and just this like weird masculinity thing, this weird Kim Toolman Taylor thing that exists with bacon, the cheese love or the memeability of cheese is like genderless, and it's just like people just like it, and it's fun. Like, who doesn't like cheese except for people who are allergic to it, or the rare person who genuinely just doesn't like it, or contrarians. I don't know. But yeah, it has this universal appeal to it.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I guess, like music or something, where it's just sort of like it could be on in the background and you could be like, oh, I like this, or you don't even notice it. It just kind of like makes you happier without you even thinking about it. And also, if you want to go super duper deep into it and become a completely insufferable fucking nerd about it, you can do that too. And that is super rewarding in its own way. And you can make it your entire life. Like that, there's something cool about the things that is true of, it's neat to kind of like make your life in that world. Second to last question. Unless you were, sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, well, no, I was just going to say that, like, yeah, it's just, cheese is either the star of the show, you build your whole eating experience around it in that moment, like a cheese board or a cheese plate or whatever, or it's something that you slap on top of a burger, or it's just one element in a really cool other thing. And that's something I like about it too. It's just, it's in so many different kinds of foods. It's just such it's like, I say in the book, before guac was extra, there was, cheese was the thing you just add to stuff,
Okay, so now there has to be a third to last question, unfortunately, because I would love to know, where is the most, in your travels or your research, the most unexpected place you found cheese? Like culinarily, maybe just a cuisine where you wouldn't expect it to be popping up, or just the most unexpected type of cheese? Like, where were you the most surprised to see it?
I know just what you're saying, and I have the answer. It was when I was at the American Cheese Society's annual conference and competition, aka the Cheese Oscars, when I was there at one of the parties I went to there, somebody had made guacamole with blue cheese in it. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, why is there cheese in guacamole? People just don't do this. And then it turned out to be secretly good. So what do I know?
I think if you published that, if you somehow hacked into the New York Times food Twitter account, published the new thing to put in blue cheese or in your guacamole is blue cheese. Everyone's loving it this fall or whatever. We talk about breaking the internet. I think you would truly, like, it would be like cyber attack levels of vitriol that would be directed and would truly bring the infrastructure down.
It would be like the time that they recommended putting American cheese slices on ramen, where there was the first wave of like, you're dead to me, New York Times. And then there was the like, actually, they have a point. And it was just went back and forth like that. I think it would probably go like that. But I remember the guacamole pretty vividly at this moment because there ended up being a typo in the first edition of the book about it. I mentioned the mold glinting in the goop like emeralds. And I don't know who did this, but someone put a hyphen in between the word goop and the word like. So the mold is gleaming in the goop-like emeralds. And they're gonna fix it on the reprint. But
I was hoping that it just auto-corrected to emerald for some reason.
Oh yeah, goop-like emerald. You know how emerald, like goop.
So, I mean, extra plug for the book, though, guys, go out and grab the first edition with the never to be reproduced goop like emeralds typo. You heard it here first.
Do you want to hear the other two major typos?
Absolutely. You know I do.
Okay. So the first one doesn't have anything to do with cheese. It's just I had a mention of a multiplicity of the iconic Star Wars character Han Solo. And I wanted it to read like so many Hans Solo. I would have totally accepted like so many Han Solos. They ended up like so many Hans Solos. So that's one.
Hans. I do just like that as a malapropism of a Hans Solo.
Yeah, it seems like something that Harlan Williams would have said in that scene somehow. Like,
absolutely,
I don't know,
100%.
right coming out of his mouth. And then the other typo was that the first time I brought Gabi, my wife, to a big cheese event, she like walked in the room, saw this very long table that was completely covered with cheese and fixins, like as far as the eye could see. And she said, like, I've never seen so much cheese in my life. And I don't know what happened, but somebody after the final edit removed the word never. So it changes the meaning from like this expression of surprise and delight to like this world weary hatred of like, I've seen so much cheese in my life. You know, it's so weird. She just sounds so over it.
And she probably couldn't even taste the cheese that she ate afterwards because she was puffing so hard on that cigarette that she was dragging on when she was
exactly,
like, oh,
yeah.
God.
Yeah.
I've seen so much cheese in my life. So again, everybody run right out. First edition American cheese of the holy trinity of really great typos, I think. I think those are all wonderfully, perfectly annoying and designed to stick in the author's craw.
Yeah, I mean, I was annoyed. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't annoyed when I saw them, but I gravitated around to, okay, I mean, I guess it's kind of funny that this happened. So, rolling with it.
Second to last question, Joe Berkowitz. If you could, I'm trying to decide which is the better question, so I'll leave it up to you, and you can answer the question that you want to answer. Either just shooting from the hip, the Joe Berkowitz cheese board, either you can pull from any cheese anywhere in the world and maybe throw me a couple of preserves on there and maybe a Marcona almond or whatever you want. Freestyle me either the best cheese board that you could literally, money's no object, or freestyle me just like I'm at Whole Foods or my local somewhat upscale grocer, and I want to put together the best possible, like Joe Berkowitz approved cheese board. What's on that board? Whichever one of those questions you want to answer.
All right, I'm gonna go fantasy draft.
Do it.
I mean, I'm not. It's not gonna be that crazy, but yeah. It's good to get a variety, obviously, and so you're gonna want to get a blue in there, and I would say Rogue River Blue is this seasonal cheese from Oregon, and it's actually the first American cheese to ever win top prize at the World Cheese Awards, and incredibly, it won that last year at the chronological endpoint of me writing this book. So that was awesome. And I could not have hoped for a better outcome. So that's blue. It's only out. It just came out for the season now. So that's what makes it fantasy. Because like if we're talking June or July, you couldn't do it. You wouldn't have this cheese. So anyway, so that's your blue. I love an Alpine cheese. Those have become my favorite. And so I would say a Gruyere d'Alpage. I may not pronounce that correctly. That's a Gruyere that's made in the mountains over the summer in Switzerland. And so that's some rare stuff. You have to I'm not sure exactly how you get it to you right now. In America, there probably is a way, in the cheese internet. But that's not an easy ask.
The only thing darker than the dark web is the cheese internet.
Yeah, you can get it. Yeah, Silk Road is nothing compared to it. This is the Milk Road. God damn it.
Wait, hold on. Second edition.
Yeah. Anyway, so we got Rogue River Blue, we got Gruyere d'Alpage. I love an aged Dutch Gouda, and the one I would put on this plate probably is called OG Cristal, which sounds so much like a weed strain. It's incredible. That's what they call it in America. In Dutch, its original name is Old Grundle. Which, so that's the O and G. And I'm glad they added a weedy word at the end because it beats having to hear grundle when you're thinking about this goddamn amazing cheese that tastes like toffee. It's so good. It's like it will flip a switch in your brain because it tastes like toffee, but it's savory. And you're like, how is this even possible? I mean, yeah. So that's 3. Got to get a cheddar in there. I would say maybe the 3-year from Shelburne Farms in Vermont. That's a great American cheddar. It's farmstead, which means, the farmstead cheddar is just means that it's made where they milk the cows. It just means it's all in one place. And I can't quite describe the flavor difference of a farmstead cheddar to one where they've just, gotten the milk from somewhere else. But I don't know. There's something about it that you feel connected to the land or something in a different way. So that's 4. And then, what would be my final cheese? Because, any more than 5 is kind of too much. I've done some. I invited a bunch of friends and started a cheese tasting club in Brooklyn back at the December of 2018, I guess. And I was trying to find the perfect number of cheeses for each month, and I don't know. It was hard for me to go under 9, and but I think 5 is ideal for a board. Gabi kept. She was just like, "When are you just going to do a normal amount?" And I was like, never. But, but yeah, so 5.
When am I just going to climb a normal amount of Mount Everest?
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I mean, like, yeah, if you're, why have hamburger? You can have steak. So, oh, this is the vegetarian version of that. And, geez, I'm sort of flaking on coming up with a final cheese right now. But I'll just say, what the hell? Let's go Harbison because yeah, you got to get a washed rind in there, and that's a really good one. I feel like we're coming to the end, so I'm not gonna like give a whole spiel about what kind of cheese is, but there's a lot in the book, believe it or not, about that specific cheese. Uh, I should say, I don't know if I described the book that much, but I just wanted to say that it's not a compendium of cheeses because I worry I just made it sound like that. It's a narrative book, and my goal was to have uh, a fun and funny book about cheese. And humor is subjective, so you could read the whole thing and not laugh. I do not know, but my goal was to make it just a fun and funny book about cheese, and that's the tone it's going for. And
I mean, I think we've probably sold some books on this podcast. I know we've definitely sold some Harbison, and
yeah.
I feel great about it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you peel that top off and you warm it up a bit, and you can dip crackers like right into it. It's great.
Yeah, I should say we got, I think like the best day or couple of weeks of the quarantine for me has been Haley got me for our anniversary just a giant shipment of Jasper Hill cheeses because we'd had Harbison, we liked it, and then she got us shipped a thing from Jasper Hill Farms of like cheeses and spreads. And it's really great. I don't know if you've ever gotten a delivery from them. I mean, you've met the robot, so like you know, this is you know, week 1 Jasper Hill fandom stuff. You're way past this, but like when it shows up and you're expecting it to be like all like on ice or whatever, and you open it up and there's immediately just the thing as soon as you open it that's like, okay, don't be freaked out. The ice will have already melted. That's totally fine. That's the plan. And it will smell a little weird, and that's okay. That's just part of it. And that's exactly what it's like. And it was the greatest box I've ever received in my life. And they had basically, I guess they'd probably, because it's the pandemic and people need comfort in whatever form they can get it, she had ordered 2 wheels of Harbison, and they said basically like, yeah, this one is ready. And then this other one, because we've had like a run on it, I would like basically keep it for like a month to get it to age to the point where you kind of want it to be. And so we got to like hang on to one and actually like age it a little bit more in our house. And it was so cool. So I'm the robot, I guess is what I'm saying. But yeah, so for people that haven't had it, it's like a little fondue party almost. It's like a wheel of cheese that you cut the top off of, and then yeah, it's a dip. It's the greatest, and it tastes phenomenal. And again, we can't recommend it enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll send you a copy of my book. But yeah, there's a part where I'm hanging out with the Jasper Hill crew, and they're cooking the leftovers of a big cheese board of Jasper Hill cheeses. They just cook it up in a pot when we're sitting around a campfire. And we were going to make s'mores, and somebody had the idea, what if we put some of this fondue or makeshift fondue on the marshmallows? And we did. And it's just something that sounded really gross, but we were like, what the hell? Why don't we try it? And it ended up, I'm not going to say, I don't know if I fully recommend it, but it tasted weird and interesting. And it's something I'm glad I tasted. And it like the how the outside of a marshmallow will get kind of crisp and blackened and grainy.
Mm-hmm.
That added like this grit to the cheese. And so, yeah, it was such a weird convergence of flavors. It was bananas. But yeah, it was fun, like hanging out with the Jasper Hill crew and doing weird stuff like that.
It's very funny to me that the people that are the most into cheese and know the most about it probably behave like exactly like the people that know the least about cheese, that are just like kids playing around in their kitchen being like, let's melt this on this and maybe it'll be gross. Oh my God. Oh, it's good. Whatever, like is so wonderful. There's something so wonderfully like childlike and great about that. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's that same instinct you have when you're a little kid and you're in Burger King to like be like, what if Orange Crush goes with Dr. Pepper? I'm trying it, at the soda fountain. And I think cheese people tend to have that instinct too.
So, final question. If there were anything that you have ever eaten, be it something that you ate as a kid and are very fond of and have a sentimental attachment to, or something that maybe you guys ordered in like a fancy restaurant once that you could just snap your fingers and know how to make perfectly, that you don't already know how to make, what would it be?
Okay, this is a complicated answer for me because
welcome.
This is a dish that I wouldn't make now as when I tasted it, because I'd have to adjust for vegetarianism. But the most memorable dish I've ever had, based on pure, just the flavor was so great and it hit me in the right moment, was New Year's Eve, maybe 2001 or 2000. The next day, we were all hanging out at this guy's house who was Cajun, and he cooked everybody up crawfish etouffee with andouille sausage, and I don't know if it was like the hangover or what, but it was the perfect meal. It tasted so good, and I don't know what the hell he did to it, and I don't know if it would taste okay with like tofurkey sausage and whatever the hell substitute you can have for crawfish. But if I could make a near equivalent veggie version of that, I would do it however, whatever the maximum amount of times you can do it without getting sick of it is, once a month until the day I die, whatever it is.
I love that. And I love imagining that for some reason, if he had done the vegetarian version instead of the meat version, somehow that would have historically put us on a different path. And the subsequent 20 years of history would have been completely different.
That would be a hilarious butterfly effect right there.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining me. I genuinely cannot wait to read the book. I wish I could have read it already, but I was just too excited to get you on the show. Thank you for doing it. I know you're in the middle of insane promo push, and everybody should go buy the book, and everybody should go eat cheese and think about how great it is. 'Cause I know that I am like, as soon as I hit stop, it is a dust cloud to the kitchen to see what form of cheese we have. It might just be like shredded 3 cheese, Mexican cheese, like quesadilla blend. It's going straight into my mouth. This is the best. Thank you for doing this.
This is what I bring to the table, the desire for cheese. Thanks for having me on, DC. This has been a really fun conversation. Thanks a lot.
All right, that is it. That is all for this week's episode of Stay for Dinner. Thank you so much to my guest, Joe Berkowitz. Please go get his book, American Cheese, in whatever form makes sense for your media consumption and cheese consumption habits. I have eaten so much cheese since I talked to Joe, and it does not show any signs of abating. And frankly, that's okay. And that is exactly where we're at. If you could Please rate and subscribe this show wherever you do that for podcasts. It really, really helps other people find the show, and then that in turn helps there be more show. My podcast art is by Sarah Beacon. That is Becan. My interstitial music is by Advanced Bass, the amazing Owen Ashworth. My title song is July 4th, 2004 by Jason Anderson. I wrote a couple of novels, The Boy Who Couldn't Sleep and Never Had To and Crap Kingdom. Those are available wherever books are sold. I also read them on audiobook. You can find those on Audible if you like hearing me talk. That is it for this week's episode, and talk